right, so welcome back, everybody. So the big question that you got to think about here is, well, why did we even choose agriculture? What was wrong with the hunter-gatherer foraging way of life? Because the more that we know about it, I mean, it seems like a pretty good life. Very egalitarian, right? Very little social class, not much in the way of rich or poor, a lot of leisure time. Foraging is not a 24-hour a day thing. Now, it is an everyday thing, but it tends to be less labor and less intensive labor than agriculture does. Agriculture requires a lot of work. I'm not sure how many of you are FFA people or have grown up or lived on a farm, but agriculture is intensive, back-breaking work for several consecutive months out of the year, with huge periods of downtime during the winter when you're not planting, not growing, and you're basically just hoping that the food that you grew will make you through the leaner times. So, why? Why choose this ag lifestyle, right? And there's a number of different ideas as to why that we do. The first and the most popular is just simply population growth. As there are more of us, our food supply is under pressure. Even with the more abundance of plant and animal life after the end of the last ice age, we begin to grow our population pretty geometrically, doubling our population in local areas every probably 500 years or so. So that puts the local food sources under a lot of pressure. And we need a way basically to get more out of the existing land that we have. We need to be able to maximize the food production from the small square mileage that we're able to control. And so we start developing methods like agriculture, like domestication, to get more out of the already existing land, right? This process is called intensification. You don't know what it means, find it on that summer vocabulary and make sure that it goes into your vocabulary. Make sure those of you that are filling out a spice chart right now that this goes on to those important terms and important knowledge. Now, another idea about why we go agriculture is because of domestication. Domestication creates a codependency between us and our animals. As we spend thousands of years domesticating cattle and pigs and sheep, we become dependent upon those animals. We become dependent upon them for labor. We become dependent upon them as a food source. We become dependent upon them as a source for cloth and material. And as we become more dependent upon them and as we breed them more docile, more, favorable to us, we create animals that can no longer exist in the wild. They cannot go back into their natural environments and survive. They lack the skills to survive in the environments in which they normally did, the environments that we took them from. And so, in return for our dependency on them, they become dependent upon us for food. And so, with this need to make sure that our animals survive because they help us survive, we've got to find a way to produce enough food to feed them. Another idea on why we went with ag is thanks to the constant diffusion of ideas and technology along these, localized trade routes, these localized exchange networks. That technology, as crude as it is, diffuses along with people. And this makes agriculture available to more and more and more people. It may have begun in several localized spots, usually in civilizations and societies around rivers, which we'll talk about in the next unit with the early states. But thanks to river traffic, thanks to those areas becoming central hubs for trade, that agricultural technology is going to spread. And as it becomes available to more and more people, it becomes a chosen way of life for more and more people. Now, one of the other ideas about why we go for agriculture is because surplus food allows for specialization of labor. This is a massively important topic. If it's not in your notes already, write it down. Make sure you know what specialization of labor means. Essentially, what it means is that now that we have agriculture, now that each person's day does not consist of constantly foraging for food, right? What are those members of society who aren't employed in agriculture doing with their time? Well, what they're doing is creating other industries, right? They are weaving sheep's wool into cloth. They are turning sand and stone into pottery. They are beginning to experiment with metals and fire and creating tools out of bronze or later on down the line, iron. They are experimenting with developing written language. They are experimenting with planning governments. They are experimenting, as we're going to see in the next 3 units, with religion, okay, with organizing and unifying religious and spiritual beliefs. So, specialization of labor is a massive thing. Only agriculture can do this. Only if you have a surplus of food where some people don't have to farm can you have these kinds of things. So this leads to massive cultural development. Things like pottery start to appear, the wheel starts to appear, written language starts to appear, industries start to appear, and that gives us certain luxuries. That gives us things that we like and we want. And the more that we like and we want those, the more willing we are to dive further and further into agriculture because it is what allows us to create these luxury items. And those luxury items can then go on to be traded for other things that we want. They can be stockpiled and wealth can be accumulated. And once you have wealth, now you've got to tax it. And now from there, you've got to have government and writing. And it's a pretty perpetual cycle. Okay. Another reason why we might have gone with agriculture is because that accumulated wealth that I just was talking about, thanks to the specialization of labor, entices these hunter-gatherer groups to assimilate our agricultural way of life. Um, yeah, they may have social equality, but we've got nice clothes and nice things. And let's be honest, people like having nice clothes and nice things. And we want to have nice clothes and nice things. And as these hunter gatherer groups come into contact with agricultural people, they begin to wonder, well, how do you guys have these nice clothes and nice things? And the answer to that is, well, because we practice agriculture and not everybody has to be out foraging for food all day. So that accumulated wealth is, it's very seductive to these hunter gatherer groups. Agricultural societies ultimately become the dominant society. So, what happens to the hunter gatherers that they come in contact with? Well, those agricultural societies multiply and they begin to displace, they begin to destroy, or they begin to just flat out absorb the hunter gatherers that they come into contact with. And generally, those hunter gatherers, either fall into the fold or they get pushed out of the way into less and less favorable environments, which we'll talk more about when we get to pastoralists.